says top 10. Anyone think? Some people think it's not even in the top 100. You're very close though. It's actually the 13th most activated plugin in the world.
Wow.
Ahead of W3 Total Cache, ahead of like some plugins that are honestly a lot more useful. But they don't symbolize the hopes and dreams of a generation. So Hello Dolly is still up there. Yeah, I'm actually very proud of that. 13th most activated plugin in the world, and also the first. So what we started doing is I think filters might have already been in WordPress or V2, but we created a hook system. For those of you who don't know how WordPress's plugins work, actually super easy to write. So basically, as WordPress executes, it goes line by line through the code, and there's certain points in the code when a function called doAction says, hey, I just did a post place in the code. Is there anything you want me to do? And then plugins can register and say, hey, after a new post, I want you to do X, Y, Z. And I want you to ping, email my mom. And then once it's done, it returns back and the code keeps executing. That's what we call a hook. It was very different than the normal way, or the sort of most popular way of extending programs at the time, which was more object-oriented programming. I don't know if this is an actual term, but we sort of thought of it as aspect-oriented programming or context-oriented programming. So you could essentially insert code into the execution, and then filters, which are basically the idea, again, you can register a filter that says, hey, before I display a post, so all the content in the post, replace every lowercase p in WordPress with an uppercase p. This is actually a function in WordPress. It's called capital P, dang it. You can try this when you go home. Try to write WordPress with a uppercase W and a lowercase p on your WordPress blog, and it does not work. This was probably the most controversial thing I've ever done. It was kind of a hazing. We had this new contributor at the time. His name was Nason. He said, hey, Nason, why don't you commit this? Knowing that it would be a total bomb and quite controversial. We had journalism organizations saying that this was affecting the journalistic integrity of New York Times and Wall Street Journal. If they chose to put the WKSP, they couldn't. It was kind of an interesting thing, but it's been in there for a few years now. WordPress is really good at getting really excited about things for a week or two, and then we kind of move on. I don't know why. It happens quite frequently. Actually, the last major controversy was around Hello Dolly, if you can believe it. And I'll tell you about that later. Plugins, and then in 1.5 we introduced themes. And basically the idea that you didn't have to modify your index.php and have it get overridden every single time you upgraded V2 or WordPress at that time. And you could distribute them. And so, but with those two things, sort of an easy installation, plugin system, and a theme system, WordPress was poised to take the world. And at the time we had 0.003% of the internet. I actually remember the very first time we ever got an internet-wide sort of market share. WordPress has a feature called pingbacks, and it sends a header called x-pingback that sort of registers the pingback. Does anyone know what pingbacks are? Yeah. Basically, when you link to a site, your site says, hey, I linked to you. The other site says, oh, really? And goes back and checks it to make sure there's really a link and not just a spammer. And then it adds it as a comment. No one else supports this. It's basically just WordPress. There was one other thing called bblog that supported it. And Google, some of the web standards folks at Google were doing a report on sort of web standards across all of the internet in the Google index, saying how many sites were standards compliant, how many were still using certain features that were browser specific, etc. I said, yeah, and in our research we saw this weird header pop up on 0.03% of web pages. X-pingback, do you guys know what this is? I was like, yes! We made a blip. A dent in the universe, right? That dent has been growing ever since, largely fueled by the now over 26,000 plugins that are written for the system, and well over 5,000 themes. It's just themes that we kind of know about. There's also premium ones, etc., etc. So that has been kind of the WordPress journey. About 8 years ago, I decided to found a company called Automatic, partially because I couldn't find any place I wanted to work. I wasn't aware of the awesome DreamHost opportunities at that time. If I had been, maybe things would be different. And yeah, I wanted to create a company that was really focused on open source, so that we would, be a traditional for-profit company, but really at the core of it, use open source software and release all the software that we were working on, so that it could sort of create this virtuous cycle. Most people do not understand the tripartite structure of the government or of WordPress. Basically, there's multiple things called WordPress. I'm going to break it down for you really quickly. So there's WordPress, the software, which started, again, 10 years ago. There's WordPress.org, the website, which is separate from the software. There's the WordPress Foundation. Let's call this one of the big ones, which holds the WordPress trademark. WordPress software, and then Automatic, which has a commercial license to use the WordPress trademark for WordPress.com, but not